It's time now for the news review section. Let's get going. Welcome to the news review. Yemen's health minister says that the Saudi blockade has hampered efforts to help Yemeni civilians with medical assistance.
One of the biggest challenges we are facing is the impact of the siege, in which all the routes, including sea, air and ground, have been blocked, hampering our medical supplies. These are the main and the most important challenges and hardships we are facing, as the enemy wants to kill more Yemenis willingly or unwillingly. In the situation, our health minister is not able to send medical teams to areas which are under the siege.
Now, in an exclusive interview with Press TV, Taha al-Mutawakkil said that the Yemenis are suffering from acute malnutrition. There are more than 8,000 dialysis patients, but they lack treatment because the Saudis are preventing the entry of dialysis equipment and supplies. According to the Yemeni health minister, the number of cancer cases has also increased due to relentless Saudi bombardments and its use of internationally banned ammunition. He has also slammed the international community for offering no help and staying silent about the Saudi crimes in Yemen.
Neither international organizations, including the United Nations, have managed to get the medical supplies into the country, nor have they given the permission to reopen the Sana's airport to take out the patients for treatment outside of Yemen. Meanwhile, they have also not provided medicines for those with transplant issues. These medicines are very expensive, and every transplant patient has to spend between $1,000 or $2,000 every month.
Well, they said that the Saudis want to destroy the Yemeni nation in the eye of the international community. Yemen's health minister said that half of those hospitals, which were fully operational before 2014, are either out of service or destroyed by the Saudi-led airstrikes. Al-Mutawakkil also called for an immediate reopening of the Sana'a airport in order to allow the patients to get treatment abroad. Now let's discuss this a little bit. We will have Tony Gosling, who's an investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Good to have you with us, sir. The airport is closed, the Sana'a International Airport, and also this Saudi blockade. You know, people are in need. Half of the hospitals are already out of order, as you just heard, and the other half, they lack equipment, they lack medicine, and so what's going to happen to the patients in Yemen? Who can do what?
Well, looking at the situation in Yemen, people might be forgiven for thinking there's something wrong with human nature. That anything like this can be allowed to continue with the United Nations and the rest of the world looking on. And one of the reasons that it is allowed to continue, very important one of those reasons, is because it's not really featuring very high on the news agenda in the West here. So there aren't that many people looking on. And it's something which appears maybe occasionally, a little flicker on the news programs, very little in the way of any kind of documentaries from the Yemen, and nothing is really in the consciousness of the politicians, the lawmakers and the media really, and of course the ordinary people in the street here in the UK about what's happening there. The other problem is that there is a lot of arms sales to Yemen, and I think it's important to look at the context of how something like this awful, appalling slaughter can be allowed. So what is the actual origin of it too? What is this really about, this attack on Yemen? For over 4 years now, roughly 80,000 dead, we believe. I mean, these are very difficult to make accurate statements, but that's a rough estimate, the last one I've seen, and at least 90% of those being civilians. So why is this allowed to go on? What is the strategic reason for a war like this to be able to continue as it is? Well, I can tell you why. It's because the Yemen is the thorn in the side of Saudi Arabia. For many, many years, decades, these were really part of the same country. In fact, even if you go back hundreds of years, and it was only relatively recently that the West drew these sort of dividing lines in the Middle East that separated Yemen from Saudi Arabia. You know, it's all part of the Arabian Peninsula. It's the same country, and of course, the radical people, the very ordinary and normal people in the south of the Arabian Peninsula are a threat to the Saudi royal family. But the West wants to keep that royal family in place. No elections there, no democracy, just autocracy. And that is actually what's at the root of this. When it comes to health, as you asked about, fascinating to see what they're saying, what Taha al-Mutawakkil, if I pronounce his name right, the health minister in Yemen is saying about what's happening to the hospitals, because this should be major headline news in the West, and it simply isn't.
Yeah, but Tony, the question is, why isn't it headline news? Because it just came to the, as maybe headlines, maybe just in the news, just after Jamal Khashoggi's case. Maybe some people heard, including in your country, the UK, they just heard maybe the word Yemen for the first time. They just maybe heard it, that there is a country called Yemen, and it is on the map. And unfortunately, that's been the case in many countries. And the reason for the silence of the Western media, and also, do you think that, you know, more than 4 years pass, and Saudi Arabia and its allies never thought the Yemenis could put up with such resistance? And they are now targeting them like those tankers that they targeted, and they have drone attacks, and they have, you know, precision in surgical operations. So would the Saudis just think of going on with this war that has brought them nothing? And on the other hand, they are also contributing to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, contributing to the UN to help the Yemenis. I mean, that's a joke, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions there, but most importantly, I think the question you raised about the media, why we have so little on the Western media about this, is because the mass media in the West, I'm afraid, they're mostly, apart from a few organisations like the BBC, which are nominally state-run, the media are big companies, big corporations. They have their profits and their money often in tax havens. They're avoiding tax. They're very political animals, very much like the big corporations. They are big corporations just like Shell or the other massive oil companies and big financial institutions like the banks. And so they have very much a point of view, which is a point of view of big business, and they want to put that point of view. This is a very embarrassing war for them, because it's not being, it doesn't fit in. As they used to say when I was at the BBC, Tony, this is the wrong story. And there are people higher up than my pay grade, even higher up than the editors. We're talking about the managers and the owners of these media companies that do not want the situation to change. And the reason for that is because Saudi Arabia is very much an important oil supplier, but it's also part of a very powerful move to balkanize the Middle East, military operations in the Middle East going through Saudi Arabia. Without Saudi Arabia, this would be a very, very difficult operation to conduct. Obviously, they have the Israelis as well, who are their allies in that part of the world, but the Saudis are almost pretending to be an Arab-Muslim sympathetic source. Actually, they're really not. And this is the embarrassment that the West doesn't want people to know about. Effectively, Saudis committing war crimes. We in the West are making money from it. These big corporations that effectively now control many of the political parties in the West. They're very powerful. They fund these political parties, and they control the press. And I can tell you, if you control the press and if you control political parties, you pretty much control a country. And that military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us of is now very much in the driving seat in the West. And that's one of the problems we have to cope with here. I mean, the end result for ordinary people in the West is austerity. It's also mass poverty, enormous wages which simply do not pay the bills. And that is a part of the oppression that's now pretending to be the democratic West.
Okay, and Joni, is it a better idea for Saudi Arabia and its allies to stop the war at this point? Because, you know, given the fact that the Yemenis are getting stronger and starting to hurt them badly.
Well, that's right, and it's not been reported here, I don't think, at all. But in North Yemen, there have actually been Saudi towns and Saudi bases attacked and some captured. I'm not sure for how long, because the news reports are pretty scant. But they're threatening to move north up into Saudi Arabia from Yemen, which is actually a very positive sign. It should send a very strong signal to the Saudi royal family to stop this war. That's the sort of thing which is the only thing that will, because this military-industrial complex in the West, which is very closely allied to Israel and NATO, believes that it can get away with these crimes and make its billions and billions of profits. By the way, the NATO political lobby is extremely strong. So that is to say, the military-industrial complex take a great deal of interest and effort and spend a lot of money in getting politicians to do what they want. And tomorrow in Switzerland, in Montreux, the Western mass media's worst kept secret, the Bilderberg conference, will start for 4 days, where these massively powerful people that control most of the money in the Western world will be getting together to decide our futures. And to a large extent, one of the things that we've proven over the years from these Bilderberg conferences, which hardly get reported at all in the press, even though there's a very interesting people there, like the tech giant companies, the banks, Henry Kissinger, various other people, the boss of Google, the guy that started Google, Eric Schmidt, he'll be there. All these people are gathering there together, but it hardly gets reported. And one of the things that we know that they do is they are very interested in getting wars started to make profits. That's one of the reasons, of course, that some of the media companies who attend these Bilderberg conferences walk in the door, and the politicians, but then they will never talk about them and what's said afterwards.
Okay, appreciate your comments. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist who joined us from Bristol. And with that, we come to the end of this news review. Thank you for watching.